What are we jamming? Culture jamming does not have to involve a jar. It does not have to involve Bob Marley, though he is jamming. Culture jamming to us is something that harnesses the power of a figure, a medium, or a moment to catapult a message. Think in terms of the subversion or disruption of cultural space, cultural moments. As an example here, I've included chocolate hummus, which I think everyone wonders why it exists. One might argue that that's a disruption of a cultural space. Admittedly, that is not the kind of culture jamming we're talking about, since this is the wrong kind of subversion, in my humble opinion. What can you jam? Things along your commute, what and where you consume things, and events that you might attend. So buses, ads on trains, social media, television, publications, games, billboards, cultural events, business affairs, even shareholders meetings, which people have done. These all have a culture. Disruptions include holding protests, but to culture jam, you really sort of have to go a step beyond that. And I'll give some examples, I think, in this presentation. So as you can see here, this is a quote. If you can see it, as you can see, this is a quote by Aryeh Mikkel, who's a then deputy minister in the Israeli Foreign Ministry, talking about how art and culture are important to Israel's status in the world. Well, this is talking about how to use art and culture and how Israel weaponizes it, but obviously demonstrates that art and culture are important to Israel's status in the world and is part of the tool set it uses to whitewash its crimes and system of oppression. Over a decade ago, the Israeli government actually launched something called Brand Israel, and they assigned a formal ambassador of marketing and branding at one point who reported back to the government. So it was a formal thing. They used artists such as the supposed peacenik Edan Reichel to act as ambassadors. Reichel actually reported back to the Israeli Knesset, even though he's supposedly an apolitical artist, after touring the African continent on behalf of the state of Israel. Israeli artists touring abroad would actually often be presented with conditions for government funding that they would want to receive, that condition how they talk about the Israeli state. So think about that and keep it in mind while we're presenting here. For Israelis generally, similar to their state, to their government, culture and media coverage is big. This is a visual representation of some of the differences between cultural and non-cultural boycott events, demonstrating the response and feedback from Israelis when one or the other happens. So here's an article about Elvis Costello, in which he decided to cancel his show in Israel, and that received 164 comments on Haaretz and 72 comments on Yediot Ahronot, Ynet. And the same patterns actually exist in Hebrew. Meanwhile, a Haaretz article about Veolia and other foreign companies avoiding the Israeli state got no comments on Haaretz, and in Ynet actually garnered just about a dozen comments. In general, from what we've seen, articles about culture and cultural figures draw a lot of attention in Israeli media, and I would argue that applies elsewhere as well. So what is the message being sent in culture jamming? Art won't be used to whitewash what the Israeli state and its military are doing. We will disrupt it. No more status quo, no more casual advertising of apartheid. This is not a normal situation. You are not a European country, but rather you're acting like a European colony, or are we? Here, by the way, I've highlighted really quickly 2 artists and the sort of conversations that happen around their decisions to either play or not play in Tel Aviv. And you can see they've garnered a lot of attention on social media. So the conversations are big. I'm going to hand it over to Dunya.
Okay. Great. Can you hear me? Okay. So first, I just want to say that I'm really honored to be a part of this. I really appreciate everybody at Palestine Writes Back, and this is a very impressive offering. So thanks for inviting me and including me. the first thing that I want to talk about is the first time I ever culture jammed. I didn't know that it was even happening. I had never heard that term, and it was in 2004 when a colleague told me. I was working in Palestine with Hannah Mermelstein, and she told me that there was a fund for Jewish 18 to 26-year-olds to go to 48 or Palestine and to be Zionized, basically a Zionizing travel program, and to encourage people to emigrate, really, and to use the Jews-only law of return. And at that time, I said, no, let's work on that. We'll refute that somehow. And we launched, they had Birthright Israel, and we launched Birthright Unplugged. And we did the opposite of an anti-Zionist travel program for North Americans. And then we also had a project called Replugged, and we took kids from refugee camps in Palestine to Jerusalem, the sea, and their ancestral lands, and we did work around the right of return. So we tried to subvert the that Zionizing project, and we got sued immediately. And that really helped. That meant that we got lots of attention, and we were sued even before we ran a single trip. So it was really successful, and we built about a little bit over a decade's worth of work on this intervention, which opened up a lot of space for organizing, produced a lot of folks who do BDS work and other kinds of work that are justice oriented around Palestine and other things. And actually, some of them are on the call right now, so are on this meeting right now. So thanks for your efforts. And then pretty quickly, there was the BDS call came out about a year later, and that opened up a whole nother world of work and a lot of jamming that resulted from that very empowering campaign. The work that I'm going to show you now in this presentation is by Street Cred, for the most part, which is a cultural jamming organization, or like a group. We're pretty grassroots and informal. We are organizer activists and artists, and we jam basically in the Bay Area, and then we try to spread that work virally. I'm going to show you 5 campaigns that are parts of the BDS call. They build on that call, and then also a few methods. And I'm going to go quickly, and forgive me, interpreters, I'm so sorry. Hopefully the work will speak for itself some. I'm going to go quickly, and I'm also going to tell you how to find this work after. So you can watch this video again and you can find the work. This first piece was made by some people, including myself, who went on one of the BDS boycott, the BDS Birthright Israel trips. And this is Jerusalem on either side of the wall. We're looking at the west side of the wall. There's typically very little work there. And so that's one thing to think about if you want to do. We're hoping this presentation is empowering. And if you want to think about how to jam, think about work that needs doing. So we saw a blank wall, and we saw a message that we thought would resonate for Jewish Israelis, especially settlers who would use this road. And we sprayed this. Also, I'm starting with stenciling because stenciling is an extremely easy way to jam. All you need is a knife, cardboard, spray paint, and an idea. So that's a terrific, fast way to culture jam. This is another way, and you're going to see a lot of work like this. So H&M wanted to build some stores on destroyed villages in Palestine in 48, and we harvested the graphics that they had in bus shelters, and we changed them. And this one, it says, we added, you can see the graphics that we added, a weapon and the Israeli army hat. And this one says, at H&M, you can get a tunic, buy into occupation and apartheid, and ethnic cleansing, all for $14.95. So, and you would think maybe this huge weapon would mean that this piece wouldn't last very long, and this one lasted over 3 months. This is a proactive campaign. So we didn't harvest a graphic. We made a graphic and made a full sheet, and we wanted to help kick off the HP campaign. HP, Hewlett-Packard, is complicit in the occupation. And so we created this graphic and we installed it. And we don't just want to say no to things. We want to say yes to things, like the beauty of the BDS call and the beauty of people working on it. So here we have at the bottom a shout out to the Student Senate from UC Berkeley that worked for years to try to get their university, their Senate to endorse BDS. They really struggled. And so this is just also a thank you note to them, because again, these things go viral and we want to spur other movement work and show gratitude. And here's an example of something that we just couldn't tolerate that had been posted. So the upper 2 graphics are racist, hateful graphics by some shell organization called Say Yes to Peace. And we chose to use their exact style, cover their art, and post it, hoping that they wouldn't notice. And these, again, stayed up for a long time. I think people get inured to it, but we've taken out the hate speech and we've made it a boycott Israel ad, and And so it's a win. And then sometimes again, you have to be proactive. And this is a piece that we just keep on hand because it's often needed, sadly. Israel, you're not fooling anyone, all wolf since 1948. Similarly, proactive piece about Gaza. Similarly, just, you know, the horror that happened when activists tried to bring humanitarian aid into Gaza. We want to be able to speak out, and we want to speak in a fierce way. And so we did. This is an example of another gateway culture jamming method. This piece was for Land Day several years ago, and the little placards in the subway are a gold mine. They're small, and they're on all the trains, and you can use even just pretty small pieces and glue them together and then slip them in. So stenciling and these placards are very handy ways. Here's a piece for blocking the boat, which was we blocked in the west at the Oakland port. We blocked an Israeli ship, and it took several days with the dock workers union. And then all of a sudden, the ship turned away, and we wanted to very quickly thank everybody for being on the pier or at the port 24/7 for days. And so we didn't have time to print anything out, and it didn't make sense really. So our printed version says block the boat. Our projected version says we blocked the boat. Congratulations, Oakland. And here's the gear that you need to do that. You can find it on indestructibles.com. A lot of this gear is in your average office these days, and it's just, you can look up how to daisy chain these elements together and project. You need a light surface as a background. Again, in the name, just 3 more works in the name of lifting people up. The graphic on the left is from a year ago now. There was the SFO International Terminal takeover, and we want to thank all the people who filled that terminal. And so we did this image, especially forwarding Lara Keswani, who's a real heroine here. And the one on the right is Linda Sarsour, who of Empower and the Women's March and so many other things, who at that time was getting death threats. So we want to send her love, but we don't just want to do it. We want to do it in a viral way, in a persistent way, in a fierce way. And so this is what we made. Something similar, again, this is Ahed Tamimi, a political prisoner. And this is the other thing that you can do is you can contribute graphics. So we definitely, we are a culture jamming group. And so we jammed these bus shelters and we installed this graphic, but this graphic got picked up. And so her father ended up using it. Jewish Voice for Peace used it. On the lower right, it's wheat pasted across the university. And I'm sure that there are more installations of it. So it's a gift to movement work to do these graphics as well. So we encourage you to do them. Okay, so the very first campaign, I'm going to talk about 3 campaigns and show you a little bit of their arc. So the first one is around BDS in terms of the cultural and academic boycott, which is an important call. This is Blue Star, which is a propagandizing private arm of the Israeli state, and they are based in the Bay Area. So when they put up these posters around Berkeley, study in Israel, you'll like it, we jam them. And so instead of study in Israel, we say boycott Israel. And we have a little discussion back and forth between these women in the street. And they're talking about all the reasons that all the prohibitions to education for Palestinians, and why you should boycott Israel. And the woman on the lower right says, I know, I boycott Israel too. On this one, we've written study. They say study in Israel. We say study in Israel. No, we boycott Israel. And then we say why. And you can tell that we've taken out this graphic, not only because of the speech bubbles, but because we've added the apartheid wall. So you can see the apartheid wall in the upper right corner. And again, it's an exchange about the prohibitions for life under Israeli control. And the bottom says, bottom right says, I'm organizing at my university to boycott Israel, and you can too. We want to be empowering, we want to be encouraging. So this is similar, very same situation here, study in Israel, boycott Israel, we boycott because, and you can see that we've added speech bubbles and a tank. And here's how we do it. We open up the cases, we pull out the graphics, either we then just install our own, or we take them out and then we retool them. And so in this case, this one was retooled. This is what we use, doesn't take much. We have a driver, a screwdriver, a pry bar, some bits, some tape, and you can make your own graphics by hand, or you can print them out. We tend to print them out, and that is because we want them to be slick, because we want them to last. but it's also just important to knock out heinous graphics. So, and again, the work goes viral, and the propaganda goes viral. And here we have a case in Ireland where they're almost the same poster got jammed by Irish people, and it was great to get to see that after. Okay, the next piece is the next campaign was Israel. The state of Israel launched a Jerusalem World Pride in 2006, and I think most of us know that the concept of pride comes from grassroots activism and organizing, and a recognition of it. But they decided to co-opt that, all in their way, jam it, and they, without any irony, called it "Love Without Borders." And of course, there's nothing but borders, Israeli-controlled borders. And then they start to promote how great it is to be gay in Israel, and they do that in all kinds of ways, including racist ways. And so on the left, we see that they're talking about, they're maligning the whole Middle East for not militarizing with gay people, and then et cetera, et cetera. And then on the right, we see a graphic inviting people to go to Israel and on birthright Israel, and to just be fabulously gay there. And these are palm cards that showed up in bars in 48 and also in the US, and we made this as a result. And we also just distributed them. So this says, this summer there will be a party in Jerusalem. It's called World Pride, Love Without Borders. This party will be segregated. And on the backside, it just talks more about that. And that wasn't enough for them in 06. They went on in 2010, and they decided to try to co-opt queers. And in the US and in San Francisco, they decided that April should be Israeli Pride Month. June is Pride Month across the world, and they decided Israeli Pride Month should be April. And so they started this cultural festival. And I wanted you to notice that it says on their graphic, it says out in Israel. On this first one, it says out against apartheid. And here it says on the left, Israel out of Palestine. And whenever we do this, we make a small change because we want them to know that we didn't just do it once, that we jammed all of their advertising material, and that it's not safe to advertise. They can't be in public space. We're going to jam all their graphics. So we make a subtle change so that it shows that we've done not just one, but many. So here on the left, the guy's saying, I hear Israel is trying to whitewash its apartheid practices by saying it's a welcoming place for LGBT folks. On the right, that's pinkwashing, and I won't be used that way. On the left, I wouldn't cross a picket line, so I won't go to out in Israel either. On the right, I know, I boycott Israel too. So here you see in 2010, this use of the word pinkwashing. Andrew mentioned whitewashing. I think that's a commonly understood concept. There's also greenwashing, that Israel claims it's the most environmental place in the Arab world. And now we have pinkwashing, and it was helpful for a lot of work going forward. Not only did Israel try to throw their own cultural festival, they've been infiltrating cultural festivals. So this is Frameline, a long-standing LGBTQ film festival, and it's they took money from the consulate for years and years, and we fought them for years and years on it. So this is the poster of theirs that they jammed on the top, that we jammed, and it's on the top, and it says "Films bring us together." And then we say apartheid divides us, movements unite us, and a place that you can get more information about pinkwashing. And at the bottom, because we also did it preemptively, we didn't just jam their graphics, we also preemptively tried to lobby them to stop taking consulate monies and state monies, Israeli state monies. So on the bottom it says, Frameline, don't pinkwash us, there's no pride in apartheid. And they tried to infiltrate the social forum, they tried to infiltrate pride across North America and beyond. And in every case, basically, pinkwashing was quashed by activists and organizers in beautiful, artful, consistent ways. So on the lower left, a shame award by Pride Toronto. On the lower right, a whole campaign from Seattle, and a free film that can be shared about how to organize against it called Pinkwashing Exposed. So it's just replicated over and over again. It really backfired and created a lot of space for organizing. And here now we're coming full circle. So 2006, Israel launches World Pride in Jerusalem. Here we are, 2013, and it's a Tel Aviv parade, a pride parade, and there's an anarcho-queer collective of Israelis, and they're having a die-in to protest pinkwashing. So it kind of came home to roost there. Okay, this is the last campaign I'm going to show. And it's just it's about hate speech directed at Palestinians, but also at Arabs in general. and kind of just creating an opportunity to work with the city of San Francisco to amend their ways and not put hate speech on their buses. It took about 5 years or 4.5 years to get them to do that. They were advertising, they were putting hate speech on buses. They were taking the money that was being spent on that advertising and they were giving it to Arab organizations, and they posted 15 feet from the graphics that were on the buses. They posted a disclaimer, kind of like the Surgeon General, that says that we condemn statements that describe any group as savages. But they still ran buses that had that text on it. And we said no. We said it in a bunch of ways. This is my favorite. This one says, in any war between the colonized and the colonizer, we support the oppressed, support Palestinian right of return, and defeat racism. And this bus, because of how it ended up looking, it was clean enough that it just kept, they didn't take this ad out of circulation. So in the end, this campaign paid for a free ad for the right of return. So this one I love, but it's a fair amount of work to do this. They tried to go national, the Atlas Shrugs, this hateful organization, and we coordinated nationally to jam the graphics. How do we do it? We you can see sometimes the graphics are really long. They're sometimes between 5 and 7 feet, and we create the graphic. We hunt down the buses. That's a project. We find them. We customize the graphics, and then we use really heavy duty spray paint, a knife, and some double stick tape. And we do that because we want, if they are going to remove our graphic, we want them to remove the original graphic. So we want to destroy the ad. Ideally, we change the ad, but otherwise we destroy it. Just more of the same. More of the same. Took years and years to make this happen. Then this is 2015, and that was the same year that the French magazine Charlie Hebdo they published inflammatory images of the Prophet Muhammad. And then there were some murders of the journalists who did that. And we decided that year that when we jammed the hateful graphics that were on our area buses, that we would use only cartoons, and we did. And this cartoon, this one is the most special one, and this is Kamala Khan, who has her own Marvel series. She's a Pakistani American Muslim, and we decided that we would use mostly her image because we wanted to show how you can actually depict Muslims and depict them well, and not be provocative, but actually be empowering. And it got an enormous amount of press. We were on French television and all over, and hundreds of thousands of shares, et cetera, et cetera. And the most moving one to me is the middle bottom, where this article is in French and shows a beautiful picture of Kamala Khan in her superhero uniform and describing what that cartoon is all about. And we see in France now what's happening in terms of Islamophobia and anti-Arab sentiment and xenophobia, and it's a place that needs a lot of work. And it was an opportunity to work globally, but yet in the streets of San Francisco. Okay, so I'm about to wrap, and I just again want to appreciate that this is a literary conference. This piece is something that we post often for Valentine's Day. It is based on Ed Heffswaif's Map of Love, and also my father and uncle's translations of love. There are over 30 ways to say love in Arabic, and we do this work for justice, but we chose art because art is so expressive and because we have a lot of love for the work that we're doing. So I just thought I'd read a couple of the translations. So Wijd is ecstasy and love, ishq is love that entwines two people, shagaf is love that nests in the chambers of the heart, and it goes on. And you can see more of this work and not have me speaking so fast. You can look at it at your leisure at Facebook, Street Cred. And then also we have a blog. We often write about the work that we're installing. Okay, so I'll unshare and we can go back to Andrew.
There we go. Okay. Thank you for that, Dunya. And I'm going to share now. Go back to sharing here. Azim. Yeah. Okay, I'll keep this open, but going to try to speak slowly here for our interpreters. So again, I think similar to what Dunya was doing, I really aim to sort of show work as examples of things, sort of examples of what you can do, hopefully to inspire folks in terms of, you know, skill sets and like expanding what you think of when you think of both protest and culture jamming. So I'm going to give 3 examples here of advertising campaign takeovers. The 3 of them are Ahava Reborn, Sabra's Guac the Bowl, and Puma. In 2011, Ahava US, which is the US arm of the Israeli cosmetics firm that's based in an illegal Israeli settlement, and Birchbox, which is an online cosmetics retailer, ran a marketing contest on Twitter using the hashtag Ahava Reborn, which is the slogan of Ahava's rebranding campaign at the time. Members of the public were invited to submit beauty care questions with the lure of a $300 prize of Ahava products for whatever the best query was. Code Pink, which had a campaign around Ahava at the time, launched a successful culture jamming campaign. And if you search Ahava Reborn for the dates of the rebranding campaign, sort of what's on the screen here is what you'll see. When you think about the amount of money and work a company invests in doing a campaign like this, and about their relationship with Birchbox going forward as a retailer, it's a pretty big deal that this is what comes up and is what happened to their investment. So that's why I'm highlighting these. And in this case, this was just culture jamming on social media. This wasn't Code Pink's only culture jam. You can see examples here where they used Ahava's own marketing tactics to protest around and inside of stores selling the brand. In 2016, talking about Sabra Dips, the company that makes Sabra hummus and is owned by an Israeli company that proudly supports the military, convinced Palestinian rapper and producer DJ Khaled to help them launch their new guacamole product. They did this at a Super Bowl themed event called Guac the Bowl. And you could see here, this is on the right, that's from DJ Khaled's Snapchat, actually promoting the brand at an event that he did. As a response, not only did many Palestinians and solidarity activists respond across social media, but one group took it a little bit farther and decided to make a music video using the beat from Khaled's own Billboard Top 10 hit to criticize him and highlight why Sabra is terrible. And to be honest, the video was extremely catchy and well produced. And I can play it later on if folks are interested. This resulted in a great deal of media coverage, which also, of course, expanded. It talked about not only the event, but about Sabra owner Strauss Group's support for the Israeli military and the boycott, divestment, and sanctions campaign. And subsequently, actually, DJ Khaled removed all social media references to both Sabra and Guac the Bowl from his social media. I mentioned using a moment earlier. So campaigns around Black Friday and Cyber Monday, which are particular to the US, are great opportunities to disrupt and subvert a brand's marketing. This year, the Boycott National Committee in Palestine actually encouraged campaigns using Puma's hashtag PumaFam to undermine their sales. And you can see that they also ran a kind of meme-a-thon to encourage people to make holiday season memes to subvert Puma's US holiday advertising. And I mean, these are very basic things that you can do that actually have an economic impact on these companies and punish them for the policies they're supporting. Culture jamming can also be used as a media critique. 2 examples that I'll use here are ABC and Newsweek. In 2014 on ABC, anchor Diane Sawyer actually identified a Palestinian family focusing in specifically on a mother in hijab who was standing over the rubble of their home. She identified them as an Israeli family that had been struck by Palestinian rockets from Gaza. On Twitter, a few of us began tweeting at each other, basically mocking ABC for this mistake and using the hashtag #TweetLikeABC, which you can see some of the tweets here. That campaign went viral, and between the criticism that followed, including this Twitter campaign, we utilized a cultural moment essentially to both widen the conversation about the bombing of Gaza beyond the terrible mainstream media reporting, which I'm sure you're all familiar with. We were able to scrutinize media ignorance about this issue, right, in highlighting how ridiculous it is that Diane Sawyer couldn't see from the prompt that it was obviously a Palestinian family, or even looking at the video. And we forced more media coverage of Israel's bombing of Gaza at the time. Another example is in 2012, Newsweek published an issue with the cover you can see here, which is disturbing. The outrage it sparked is obviously self-explanatory, but it also created a moment for subversion through a social media response that spotlighted the dehumanization of Muslims. It made light of the silly and reductionist portrayal of Muslims. And it also centered Muslim voices in the conversation, right? Because if you look here at the tweets, like it was a lot of, mostly, I think there were a lot of Arab Muslim and general Muslim responses mocking the way that this was, the way that this cover was published. And the response to that was a lot of media coverage, highlighting both the digital campaign, but also the humor that was put forward by a lot of Muslim like bloggers, tweeps as they call them, etc. And this was simply through a creative series of responses on social media that got attention. I'm going to give some examples of culture jamming in the physical space. When the Israel Ballet came to tour the US, they were actually surprised with a series of protests and disruptions. I think that was back, well, we'll see the year in a moment, that broke the expected sort of serenity of ballet performances, and we hope put the ballet and its supporters on notice. And I'm going to go through these 3 points. In Vermont, their performance was disrupted by activists who got into the performance, which actually kicked off a lot of the media coverage. And you can see just the coverage of this one disruption reached both the local and Israeli press. This protest in Brooklyn actually garnered the attention of the culture editor at the New York Times, which he was somebody who did not generally write about Palestinians, and you can see that headline there. And then the protest itself ended up being covered. The Brooklyn protest ended up being covered by the New York Times as well. So outside of their performance in Brooklyn, you can see these terrifying protesters and their Palestinian flags. But people were happy to take a program from this kind gentleman who was handing them out. This is what the front and back of the program look like. Generally, if you saw it just sort of at a glance, it looks like something completely legitimate for the Israel Ballet. But when you open it up inside, this is what you get. Or sorry, this is actually the example of Bathsheba, but this was actually a very similar program to the Israel Ballet's program. And so this sort of covers both like Israel's whitewashing using culture. It talks about the use of sex to market Israel, which is pretty disturbing, and the use of sexuality, which was alluded to earlier in Dunya's presentation, and highlights sort of the violence that's involved in what Israel is doing in the meantime. And to really drive that home, we actually did a choreographed dance performance where people dressed up as ballerinas, for lack of a better non-gender term, and actually did like military marches in front of the event back and forth. And we actually had a band there as well, which was incredible. So another example of this type of creativity is in 2009, famed Canadian singer and songwriter Leonard Cohen decided he would make Tel Aviv a stop on his European tour. The stop was actually part of a global tour that would span the US, Turkey, much of Europe, and Palestine, Israel. As a result, activists in New York decided to call for folks to protest and encourage a boycott of the tour. The result ended up being a powerful and creative series of nearly a dozen protests at each concert across the globe, including the first ever cultural boycott protest in Turkey at the time. You can see here in New York, we scrawled messages in chalk in front of the stage entrance that Cohen and his ensemble would be using at Radio City Music Hall. We handed out these flyers, which are informational on one side, but on the other side, they encouraged people to actually put the flyer up in the concert because it said, "Don't play Israel." And actually, in the video recording of the New York protest, we used a parody that was written of Cohen's newer song called Democracy is Coming, and it was rewritten to The Boycott Call is Coming. And that music was recorded, so I wrote the lyrics and then someone else recorded the music, and that was actually used in a number of protests that happen around the world, I think including in like Germany and the UK. Here is some of the coverage after Cohen went ahead and played in Tel Aviv. I doubt that this coverage and level of attention would have happened without the creativity and protest that happen around the world. And I think you can see this hits a lot of, this is the Jewish Daily Forward, the Washington Post, Billboard, the New York Times. So we hit a lot of the mainstream media. And subsequently, after this media coverage happened, a lot of framing started to happen in the media around whether it was ethical to decide to play in Tel Aviv, which is really sort of what we wanted to get coverage on, and framed it as like a two-sided battle between people like Santana, who had canceled, and Elvis Costello, versus Elton John and Leonard Cohen, who had decided to go and play. Finally, and actually I didn't think I was going to have enough time for this section, but coincidentally I do, we still want to get to a good Q&A, but I'm going to go through this without any sort of visuals, but essentially 3 examples of the use of cultural figures where culture jamming happens. So one example is the NFL, the National Football League in the United States, had a delegation that was courted by the Israeli government to go, and it was a tour of 11 players from the National Football League that were supposed to go to do like a Israeli government sponsored tour. And first off, it coincided with a lot of racial justice conversations happening within football, American football, I should say, including the exclusion of Colin Kaepernick from the National Football League. And then essentially what happened was one player, right, through a series of connections, internal and external pressure, conversations with the player through somebody that knew them, and also public pressure through a petition, basically one player canceled and decided they did not want to go. And the result of that was subsequently, I think I have a slide for that, like six of the players out of the 11 didn't go. And I flagged this because this is a really significant moment, both in terms of Black Palestinian solidarity, because the players, I think, were almost entirely Black, and also because the people who decided to take a stand, the first 3 players that took a stand were Black football players. And when Michael Bennett canceled, and Michael Bennett, to give context, is an all-star football player, for lack of the term that's used in football is Pro Bowler. This was really significant because he wrote this very thoughtful letter that you can see here, where he cited a history of cultural figures, particularly athletes, taking stands. And he used Muhammad Ali, the boxer, as an example, talking about the impact that he had on Michael Bennett in having visited Palestinian refugee camps and showing support for Palestinians, among the many powerful stances you have probably heard of him taking. So this was a pretty big deal. It marked the first time we saw this kind of a sports boycott on such a scale. And obviously, some of you may know that now some pretty significant sports boycotts have happened. 2 other examples that I will just mention. Scarlett Johansson was hired as the spokesperson for the Israeli company SodaStream. And particularly, they focused on advertising spending for the Super Bowl, which, for anyone who knows the Super Bowl, which is the like football championship, spending for that for 30 seconds is pretty extreme. It's millions of dollars that you spend just for a 30-second slot. And SodaStream really banked on using her in this advertisement. The attention through a campaign that was brought to her, through memes that were created, through Twitter, Facebook, and like other sort of avenues of criticizing her, drew a ton of media attention. It really corrupted the opportunity that SodaStream had with the Super Bowl. It impacted Scarlett Johansson's personal relationships and also her role as a goodwill ambassador for Oxfam, the organization, global organization, which she then had to step down from. And essentially, like as many of you probably know, the media attention led to SodaStream actually shutting down its Ma'ale Adumim factory and moving within the Green Line, which they thought was more ethical, But obviously they are now part of a colonial project in the Nakab, or as Israelis call it, the Negev. The third example was Alicia Keys, in which people, in encouraging Alicia Keys not to go and play in Tel Aviv, and it's worth noting that Idan Reichel was the reason she was going to play in Tel Aviv, just to give you an idea of how impactful these figures are. People recorded videos singing her different songs and trying to rewrite them as lyrics encouraging her not to play there. And in addition, actually, somebody made an incredible video of Palestinian women resisting. And in that video, they used her song, This Girl Is on Fire, and subsequently drew Alicia Keys actually into a legal battle because she, her people removed the video for copyright infringement. So I'm gonna stop there so that we can get some Q&A time in, but let me stop our sharing. And I want to acknowledge a lot of the amazing, I think, comments that have been made here in the chat. It really is, there are amazing cultural figures. Haika, yes, I think it was really awesome that people in Massachusetts also did this. But yeah, we should move to a Q&A so folks can get any questions you might have about the practical nature of this, or some of the amazing handiwork that Dunya presented earlier.
Also, if folks want to turn on their cameras, it would be good to see you.
Whose camera did you want on?
Anybody, so it'd be good to see each other as we talk.
Oh, okay.
Hi, everybody.
I look terrible.
You look great. Cool.
And I want my people, to always be good.
Are you bitter about the hostility?
I have to be bitter at anything that's gonna hurt my people.
Settlements illegal, civil rights ain't equal. The IDF is lethal, they're killing all of your people. Oppression, injustice, man, it's unbelievable. How many reasons do you need to be bitter for your people? I'm just trying to help you learn. Your actions got me concerned. Palestine is more than just some necklace dangling on your shirt. Yeah, you say you care, but I say actions speak louder than words. I could tell you I spit fire, or I could just let you burn. Alright, you made some money, man, but tell me what's it worth? You repping a brand that's helping bury kids beneath the earth. Yeah, you throwing stacks, they throwing rocks, they building walls. Block by block, apartheid, giving your people a hard time. That's why I'm not really trying to be hateful, but what you did was shameful. If you loyal, if you smart, you gon' take Sabra off your table, man. Sabra is complicit, don't believe me, come and visit. These graveyards, these checkpoints, it's a real life exhibit.
You say you care about your people in the city that you're from. If you really wanna rep it, don't just rep it with your tongue. You got Pally on your chain, but they paying you with blood money for Israeli soldiers. Somebody should have told you, come on, son.
All right, you guys get the idea. It's pretty good.
It's awesome.
I'm glad you all are enjoying it. Do folks have questions about sort of the tools involved, like how folks were able to make some of these things, chalking? I'm trying to think of other tactics, like even just thinking about, I asked Dunya a lot of questions about the bubbles that they put on, like into the actual, what do they call, bus shelters?
Yeah, when you put the Mahid Tamimi ones in the things, it seems like it was an approved ad. Were you just putting it over something else?
They never are. They're
Yeah.
always extra legal.
That's awesome.
But they're slick on purpose so that they stick around, so that it's hard to tell.
Hi, Dunya, I missed your presentation because I joined late, but I'm gonna catch it in the recording. But I do have a question for Andrew. I wanted to ask about Pharrell Williams because he performed at the Israeli Defense League fundraiser. And I just wanted to know if there was anything done about his involvement, because that was one of my biggest disappointments, especially that he performed a song called Happy at that.
He not only, I think, performed it there. I think he even let the Israelis create a version of it or something like that I saw, in which people were like dancing around it. And I find it really disturbing and unfortunate. You know, I find it bizarre that some of these artists, I do think, you know, one of the things in a lot of the presentations I do on BDS specifically, I actually highlight like sort of what's been said in the news. And one of the things that came out in an article about a year and a half ago was that hip hop artists were less and less likely to actually go. But I think for artists like Pharrell, where you're a pop producer of sorts, like it's much more likely, and they're still within the realm of, and I think that speaks to something, right, in terms of the spaces, but you're much more in the realm of like a lot of pop artists will still go and perform, right? We had a lot of huge names. I mean, we had some big cancellations too, but so I don't know how they get away with, or how they have that cognitive dissonance or the dystopic approach that you can write a song called Happy and then perform it for the Israeli military, but yeah.
Also, I just want to mention about DJ Khaled, like, it seems like John Legend works a lot with him, and John Legend is really vocal about being pro-Palestinian. And so when someone that isn't even Palestinian, that is your associate, can be more vocal than you, that's pretty sad.
Yeah, I think Khaled kind of didn't know what Sabra was, to be honest. I mean, that is what, based on the fact that everything was deleted after, I'm assuming that was the case. But it's obviously embarrassing when that happens.
Andrew, there's another question from Sahar. So won't we get in trouble if we jam signs in public? Where does vandalism fall into this? Yeah, yes, the charge would be felony vandalism. There's a 3-year statute of limitations, and all this work is quite old, like it's more than 4 years old, and which is why I'm speaking so publicly about it. I'm doing a little bit of different work right now. So I'm outside the charge range. Something could happen, like we could be pursued afterwards. We also have gotten caught a few times doing it, because as you can see, the volume is part of what the work is. It's not just, the idea is not just for it to be a one-off, just for people to feel like they can't put hateful ads in the street. So we have been stopped. And typically what happens is, like, for example, bus drivers are very frequently people of color. So I've had a bunch of conversations where I'll say, where they want, and they want to keep their bus clean. So it's not necessarily that they care about the advertising on the bus, but they don't want to be responsible for allowing damage on their bus, right? So I've had conversations like this a bunch, where the bus driver will deboard the bus at the stop while we're adhering, and I'll explain the harm that's being caused, and just be really reasonable about it. Typically it works. Maybe I've done that, I don't know, half a dozen times. I've also had closer brushes that felt like maybe my license plate was going to be taken down, or my ID, or definitely we're recorded, our collective is recorded. And but you know, I think it's pretty small potatoes, and I also think that it wouldn't hold up very well. I mean, these are really hateful ads that the city themselves didn't stand behind, but they didn't have a policy against for a bunch of them. The other thing is that we have a tendency, in case you're going to try to do this, we have a tendency to try to do it during commuting hours, especially the morning ones, because we feel like people are very purposeful then, like between 8 and 9, because they just want to get their coffee and get to their job. So we try to use what we call those are our rock star hours, because we feel like, you know, people are in the throes of not reporting people, or not thinking that something is happening that is untoward. So it's a really good question, and I think it's worth doing some soul searching and talking to some legal people about it. You see what I look like. Our collective looks different. We have a range of people, but that's another thing to think about, is profiling and what might happen depending on what you look like if you're holding a drill or a knife to a piece of public infrastructure. But we've never had a single charge, and we've done it for well over a decade.
Yeah, in the work, I think in our work, we've had a number of legal run-ins. And I will say it's really great that now Palestine Legal exists. So if you if you end up in that situation, I almost immediately reach out to them just to say, hey, I'd like to speak about something that happened. Here's what's happening. And then speak more openly once we're on a line together. But the other thing is, I think like knowing your rights is important before you go in any situation. In Adela, New York, we used to study the block. Like we look at the building map, the property maps in New York, so that we knew exactly what our rights were. We would be prepared for anything, for any confrontation or discussion about that stuff. And there are instances where I was doing the ushering, where I'm like handing out the fake programs at 2 different events. And at one of them, a cop came up to me, and I had agreed to do this in advance, but sort of with a level of confidence. So I wore a suit in one of the cases, right? Somebody came in and a cop came up and basically said, hey, people are really upset about this program in there. And I was like, oh, okay. And he's like, what are you handing out? They say it's like racist. And so I showed it to him. And like Dunya said, I used the opportunity for a conversation where I'm like, hey, this is like what I'm talking about. Like, what is racist about this? Please tell me. And he was like, oh, okay, I didn't realize it's like about a state and it's not about people and stuff. I'm like, yeah. And he didn't know what to do at that point. So oftentimes, literally the confidence that you have in these situations, which I'm sure is not surprising to Palestinians who are on the call, but like that confidence actually has an impact on how the interaction happens. But I think you do have to be thoughtful, like Dunya said, about who you choose to do it among your group and what you're prepared to do in the scenario that something happens. And I apologize, I think Leila had a question.
Can I just add a little bit? I mentioned what I said. Typically, if the person is a person of color, if it's a white person, I wanted to say that what I generally say is that it's an art project, and I generally repeat that several times. And I think that something about the concept of art makes them just think that it's maybe like an academic project or a school project or something, and that's been very successful. So that's my answer for white people. I also wanted to mention that people are writing that maybe if they're in hijab, that maybe it's not the right fit. But I wanted to say that there are so many pieces to this. So there's design, there's photography. Actually the installation. I have a particular disposition to, and many of our collective members do, but there's also distribution is extremely important. Writing about it, you'll see if you go to our blog, we write about it also. That's a whole nother project. So making this work get bigger than just the little installation, which I focused on, it's really critical to this being real movement work. Otherwise it would just be an art installation. So I would encourage you to find a place and a way that suits you to work, because there's always ways to work.
I just have a short comment and then a question. I did the divestment campaign for 12 years from 2002 to 2014 in 7 cities in Massachusetts. And we built every installation of show or action. We were not allowed to put anything up, but we carried our own posters, set them up, distributed leaflets, knocked the doors. We were banned from the subway in Boston and Cambridge, but we were allowed outside certain stores and on the streets, as long as we were like mostly on the street side. Unfortunately, it was taken over and it was dissipated eventually, although we did amazing work for a long time, putting ballot questions on the elections, local elections, which was amazing information being distributed out there, and information that led people to vote for us. These things, I think, have a lifespan, and unfortunately, we're not able to merge things. I would like to know what you think, that how your action could have been used with ours, and where's the next step? Where do we go from here? We're stalling, I think, right now. Anyone? Hi, Dunya, anyway.
I can take a pass at that question. I think, you know, it's an interesting strategy question about where do we go? And I think that this has been pretty much a horrifying vortex for the last 4 years. So I'm thinking that going forward, we will have more opportunities to cross-pollinate and to collaborate. And that's my hope. I mean, I think BDS also is an opportunity, gives so many opportunities for projects to kind of pop up as long as they're under the umbrella of the 3 elements of the call. And that's basically what we have used, is that we've just we've done some amount of coordination and some amount of initiating, but just kind of tried to keep the ball rolling. But it's a persistent question about strategy, and a good one. And did we lose Andrew? It seems like we might have lost Andrew.
He put in the chat that he is going off camera.
Yeah, sorry guys.
Oh,
Not in
hey.
here. Apologies. Yeah, I mean, I think I don't have a where do we go from here answer, to be honest. Yeah. Yeah, I'm honestly not sure. Like, I guess, okay, so just, I guess thinking about how to, well, for one, I think we did this workshop hoping that some of these tactics would help, because I actually think there is a piece here that that goes unacknowledged, that there's like kind of a lull in terms of the campaigning and work that's been happening very recently. I think we're mostly focusing here on like the tactics and ways that you can generate the media attention, but I think it's, I mean, I guess, I think those campaigns that, the campaigns that are ongoing are necessary in order to like, for this to be bigger, basically, if that answers the question.
Dunya and Andrew, what about like, what would be like the cost of a campaign? Can you tell us like what's involved in terms of like resources?
I mean, it really depends. Like, for example, what does it cost to print out a bus shelter graphic? Or, I mean, a lot of times, most everybody works volunteer, and it just depends. So oftentimes you can, like for those programs, we did the programs for the Israeli Philharmonic here too, and people just at their offices, like, you know, did all the photocopying for free. We made props for free, pitched and made graphics for free. So it was really a small lift. Sometimes these slicker ones that are like a long bus graphic, or sometimes they can add up, but we're not talking about a lot of money, really. We're talking about a lot of free labor.
Yeah, that's what I was just asking.
Yeah. There is a great question. Yeah, Andrew, you want to answer that? Because there's another question.
So I would say, I mean, in terms of the cost of things, obviously a lot of the stuff, I'll give you an idea. Adela New York raised $15,000, I think, in 2000, maybe like 7 or 8, maybe somewhere around there, but it lasted the organization, because it's a volunteer organization, it lasted us 8 years. So that $15,000 lasted the organization 8 or 9 years, with all of the printing that we're talking about and like huge signage. We actually, for some of our campaigns, developed entire like musical instruments that were being mounted up, and huge banners and stuff like that. But sometimes it's been people just grabbing $5 chalk and going out and doing something.
There's another question. In my city, we are doing a lot of abolition work and protesting against police trainings in Israel. How would we do stuff like this to support that? I didn't show it, but I did a graphic that's to stop Urban Shield, and there were Urban Shield trainings, these partner trainings with Israel to do tactical police, militarized police trainings in the Bay Area, and we did bus shelters for those, and they said something like from Fallujah to Palestine and back, and then they talk and from Fallujah to Palestine to Ferguson. And they were against Urban Shield, and we ended up kicking Urban Shield out of our municipality, but it probably went somewhere else. So I think it's good to do this kind of work wherever it's showing up. And again, it's an accessory more than the movement itself, but it's meant to kind of bolster and be exciting and draw people in, and also send messages out. But it's this kind of artful stuff is an accessory to other movement work. So I'm hoping that you're in touch with other folks who are doing that abolition of police trainings work in your community too.
Yeah, Mira, here in DC, we have, in Washington, DC, we have a campaign called Occupation Free DC that is targeting Israeli police trainings with the DC, the MPD as they're called, Metropolitan Police Department. And the campaigning actually has given, like, there have been a lot of opportunities for creative action. And also, I think in the moment that we're in, like Black Lives Matter organizers have been doing amazing things. And so folks from Occupation Free DC have gone and supported a lot of that work. That includes chalking banners, right? Sort of hilarious protest parties like in front of the police chief's house or the mayor's house, things like that. And in that way, it naturally and organically incorporates Palestine into a conversation that is about general police violence, right? I guess I want to go back to Leila's question, just because I feel like I really didn't give a great answer. I don't know. I think I was just thinking, like, really campaigns have to exist, and these tools are really to amplify a lot of those campaigns. They don't always have to exist, but I think, Leila, what you were alluding to was that, like, how do you get beyond these one-off actions or something like that, right? And like, how do you do this work in a way that grows something? And I think for me, all of the work has always been tied to, and I think for Dunya too, like, has always been tied to campaigns. Now, I think there's a difference because, like, you can do one-off things. People go and, like, wheat paste. And for folks who don't know wheat pasting, it's like putting up, like, posters with stuff on the back, and they, like, are able to stick it up in a way that I think actually is technically, like, legal on different things. But essentially, those are more one-off. Those are, like, for messaging or awareness or to keep a message present. But all of the campaigns we did were in the service of, or all of the work we did was in the service of a campaign. So we create a video, it's focused on a campaign with a goal in mind. So we would think about the campaign first. And I think right now, you know, there's tons of work that happens, political, legal work. There are BDS campaigns that are ongoing. In fact, I think one was just launched around Pillsbury, the, like, bread dough company, because of their complicity and, like, and, you know, those things all present opportunities for a variety of these tactics. And I think this is where the media coverage and the amplification comes from, is in, like, writing press releases and doing stuff. And going back to something someone said earlier about, like, being careful with what you do, I want to really echo what Dunya said about the amount of work that exists behind showing up and doing the thing itself. Like, somebody had to design the programs that I was ushering and handing out. Somebody had to, like, design the press release that went out, like, celebrating the sort of action that we took, or someone had to choreograph a dance, or someone had to, you know, bring the tool set, or honestly, somebody had to bring hot chocolate or tea so that people weren't, like, too cold while they were out doing stuff. So.
Thank you.
Yeah, there's always roles. There's always roles.
I have a question. I know we're running a bit out of time. This is Mohammed. It might be too big of a question, so we don't have to address it. We don't have to address it completely. But the question is, in regards to the UAE. So all the collaboration madness that's happening, when that collaboration started, we knew, activists knew, that this collaboration had started far before it was made public. And so people were on sort of both sides of the spectrum. Some people said this is the end of the BDS movement, and some other people said this will test the BDS movement. Recently, I don't know if any of you have been following, but Muhammad Ramadan, who is an Egyptian artist, performed in Dubai with an Israeli singer, and they had this photo op situation. He posted it on Instagram, and Egypt blew up to the point where he apologized, removed all the pictures. And what's interesting is that they actually, the Israeli government actually retweeted the image saying art brings us together, when we know that that's just bullshit. So my question is, what role do we play in the bigger conversation on BDS, more so from the broad context? Like, we can do campaigns in New York, San Francisco, Philly. What do we do about the UAE? Where do we even start to think about that?
Well, I can tell you what people did in DC, which was they incorporated the protests against Saudi and other countries around their human rights violations. They've incorporated sort of the normalization piece into that. But also people went out in DC and projected messages onto the Emirati embassy and onto the Bahraini embassy and stuff. Basically like denouncing it and sort of like, you know, talking about what the implications were. I mean, they had a bunch of amazing slogans. And a lot of those actually overlap with some of the work I was talking about earlier with Occupation Free DC. So, I mean, that is a start. Again, those are creative one-offs. I don't think there's as strong of a campaign right now challenging what has happened, though I do know there's a letter out of Palestinian artists, writers, like intellectuals, basically criticizing the this normalization.
I know that there's been a lot of cross-pollination with Jordan to try to boycott Israeli goods, and I'm sure that there are activists in UAE and, you know, wherever these other partner countries that Israel's going to try to partner with, and to find people who are in these countries to work together and to support, I think, is an important important thing to do, because I'm sure they're very angry and very frustrated. You know, maybe they're not able to work in certain ways that we can work here. I don't know, but like maybe we could find ways to help them.
Sorry, I'm responding partially to some of the stuff in the chat there too. I think, I mean, it's cool that Roger Waters talks about Palestine. And he's in the video that I actually just linked to there. I really like Sayumi's thing about promoting Palestinian artists and artwork, and I think that that can easily be incorporated into a lot of the things we're talking about. One example is in protesting an Israeli dance company coming here, we brought a Palestinian dance troupe, and then members of the dance troupe actually were part of the protests, but they also did their own tour. And so we leveraged the fact that there's energy around this boycott stuff to channel it into helping fund and bring these Palestinian artists as well. So dance companies like Al Fanoon, and I know probably 5 different dance companies have come in recent times. I believe if Susan's still on, I know that she is an excellent dancer also. Have we reached bedtime?
It's like maybe. Does anybody want a last question? advice on getting stuff like this.
And we didn't ask at the start, but we were going to poll folks to see how familiar people are with the actual boycott. And I apologize. I think in everything that happened, we dropped all of that. We had been I was setting up the like poll stuff, but it got ended, so we got wiped out on that. But if anyone has questions about those things, I think we can probably provide our emails here in the chat for follow-ups and stuff.
Sure. And also, Mira, if you want to ask some advice, feel free. You can also access us over time.
Oh, thank you guys.
Cool.
All right. Well, everybody have a lovely evening. And thanks for joining us.
Thank you. This was great.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Palestine Writes Back, too. And thank you, Andrew.
Thank you. This was fantastic.
Good. So glad. So glad. Nice to see your face.
Thanks, Dunya. I'll tell Umaya I saw you.
Yeah, do. Yeah, tell her hello.
All right. Well, Dunya, I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you so much, Andrew.
No problem. Thank you. That was awesome.
I know I spoke too fast. But what are you gonna do?
No, it was really good.
Was it? Great.
Yeah. Excellent.
I loved yours too. And yeah, I would love to do more work with you.
Yeah, likewise. All right, I'm gonna log off because I know we're
okay. All right, we're just chatting. Okay. All right. Bye. Take care. Bye, everybody.